Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest web chat with myself, James Robotham, the QBS Managed Product Specialist, and Sascha Giese, the Head Geek of SolarWinds, and Bill Fitzpatrick, the CEO of Loop1, the #1 SolarWinds Global Professional Service Delivery Partner. So the last time we did this web chat, we were talking about how the benefit of SolarWinds within the network. We talked about NCM and how some of the reports could benefit the partner community, who could basically sit there and use SolarWinds as a complementary or a differentiator. So today we're looking more at how you move away from the network, and we've talked about DNS. So DNS is obviously still critical for your network engineers, the people who probably, if you're selling in SolarWinds at network level, are your supporters, your advocates. But the DNS is often run by a separate silo, set by the application, the Microsoft specialist within the business. And this means that we can use SolarWinds as a great stepping stone into another silo and another conversation with the business, allowing you to be stickier and more attentive to your customer's business. So how does DNS work, and how do SolarWinds jump from that silo to the next silo?
Well, James, you are absolutely right that we are probably very famous because everyone still thinks that we are like a network-focused company, but we do much, much more than just that. Just keep in mind that each IT department consists of various teams, and the network is just a smaller part of this. And we all know in situations where maybe Outlook is a little bit slow, everyone is blaming the network, but the experienced network administrator knows it is rarely the network, okay? If it is a network problem, it is usually DNS problem, but that is something which Bill explain in a few minutes. But the thing is, these different teams, like the network team, application team, cloud architects, whatever, they don't talk to each other. And in some organizations, they don't even like each other. So it is hugely beneficial to have a tool like SolarWinds, which is like this single source of truth. Basically, it's one tool that brings all the groups together. It brings humans together, and they have access to the same set of data. They see the same resources, and we have a couple of features which will point the user with their nose to the root cause of an issue. And DNS, I think, is a very good start. Bill has chosen this for us.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. You're exactly right, both James and Sascha, with what we're talking about right now. Tools and the fact that all of our silos with their deep expertise generally have their own tools. Maybe the sysadmin team has some Microsoft tools, maybe some SCOM or some SECM, or some other third-party tool. The network team's got SolarWinds. The database team maybe has its own tool, and regardless of which teams we're talking about, we've got all of these different teams, each with their own tools, and the tools are part of the problem. And so what I'm really excited about with the direction that SolarWinds has taken, really for years now, going back to the creation of AppStack, is that the tool is no longer contributing to silos being fragmented, but now it's powering a phrase that we refer to as cross-domain intelligence. The ability for teams to work together because the tool leads the way. The tool says, here's the network data, here's the application data, and in our example today, we're going to talk about DNS information, DNS statistics, DNS performance, because as Sascha was just saying a moment ago, it's a great segue for a network-enabled team to talk to the rest of the organization about a network service that's absolutely critical to the performance of applications. I think we've all heard of Cloudflare and these other organizations having big internet outages due to DNS issues. Well, SolarWinds can monitor that, right? So Sascha, we've got here our Windows DNS Server Details view. Now, if you're working in an environment that uses a different type of DNS, maybe bind DNS, you could get the same type of statistics. It doesn't have to be a Windows DNS server, but we're also going to talk a little bit about Active Directory in a moment here. So that's why we've started with a Windows DNS example. So Sascha, anything you want to touch on here as we start to take a look at the type of information that SolarWinds can bring? Like maybe talk a little bit about SAM and how SAM is bringing this information.
Well, yes, this is actually a template coming from a part of the formerly known Orion platform called Server and Application Manager. And sorry, this is a template-driven application management system. So basically what we look at right now is like a 3 mouse click action. So it's really, really easy to deploy it. And as you mentioned, this is an example for a Windows server. We have the same for Linux sort of RISC-based servers out there. And everything, each element which you see there is coming from the template. And this is built based on our experience. So we know what is important, what are important values. And some of those values actually might not be so easy to understand, even for someone who is an expert in network technology. So we usually would give a little bit of an explanation on specific KPIs over there.
Yeah, exactly. And so in the case of a Windows environment, this DNS service and all of the statistics that you can see here on the right side, these are coming from a Windows domain controller. And so this is a Windows domain controller that's being monitored. And so sort of tying that back to the way that SolarWinds aligns information, one click away, I can see that this domain controller is a virtual machine. And on my left navigation, if I want to, I can go in and I can see how this domain controller connects into the rest of the environment by leveraging the map view here and seeing, again, sort of the network team knows what's happening in the network. My systems teams are going to know that I've got this domain controller out here. And obviously that domain controller is dependent on the network. So there's an automatically generated diagram here that shows how the domain controller connects to the rest of the network as well as the applications. But importantly, in addition to the systems team being able to monitor in partnership with the network team those DNS statistics, we can also monitor Active Directory. And so that brings us to another beneficial feature within SolarWinds, which is what we call App Insight for Active Directory. Sascha, do you want to give us an overview on this one?
So there's actually 4 different app insights in the tool, and those are, let's say, templates for really complex situations like Active Directory, SQL Server, an Exchange server, and an IIS. So usually when you look at an IT team, there might be a jack of all trades who knows a little bit of everything, but might not be an expert in such complex topics like what we look at right now. And Active Directory, for example, is relatively easy to deploy, but really difficult to troubleshoot because there's so many moving parts and you're not looking at just one AD server. It's usually multiple. I think, Bill, we looked at least 4 in your example there, right? So
right.
It's a little bit bigger over there. And what we see on the screen on the right-hand side right now is the relationship and the jobs of individual domain controllers.
Right. So here, if you're working with a systems team as a reseller and you're talking to the team that's responsible for Active Directory, they're going to care about the health of all of these roles that these domain controllers must be providing at any given time. And how organizations choose to deploy those roles might vary, according to organization. But what SolarWinds is demonstrating here is a very easy, at a glance ability to see the health of these very important roles that support the health of Active Directory. Right above that, we have anybody that's ever done any work with Active Directory knows the pain of bad replication or malfunctioning replication. So SolarWinds is monitoring that as well, automatically identifying what replication is taking place and the health of that replication with the visual indicators there, as well as the detail of each of the replication links, so to speak, for each domain controller that's in the environment. So this is something that's unique to App Insight. This is something that SolarWinds does to make monitoring Active Directory easy. And then, of course, it doesn't stop there. They also have, in similar to what we saw in that previous template, all of the statistical information, monitoring Active Directory for key events, and monitoring the Active Directory processes, things like the DNS service, things like the Active Directory domain services, all are automatically monitored by this. So in addition then to our site details here as well. So we have a very comprehensive, easy to deploy template for monitoring Active Directory. And so, Sascha, going back to your comments earlier, this really does bring teams together. It helps provide that cross-domain intelligence and allows the tool to lead that conversation so that teams aren't pointing fingers at each other, but they're working together.
Just what we see top right corner there is basically 3 different teams. We have the AD team, we have server guys, we have network dudes who would look at these charts and see, well, everything is green there, it's fine. Well, a little bit yellow. So we will see whose responsibility it would be if there's something seriously wrong.
Exactly. When something turns yellow now, instead of having one team pointing fingers at another team, we can have all of the teams talking to each other, working together. So this is actually an interesting example. This particular example here talks about a particular type of authentication. And this is something that could happen to your clients in production, where they might initially want to point fingers at each other, but because they can come into the Orion console and say, oh, okay, this event is occurring because of the way we configured a service account in our environment, it's an expected condition and it's not a problem because I'm sharing information, I'm collaborating with my colleagues, and we're looking at the same console. We're not having to go challenge each other and say, prove that you're not the problem. Instead, we can work together to say, we know what the, and in this case, it's actually a safe condition. It's a condition that we can ignore because we know that we can configure it intentionally that it would generate that message. And so the teams can collaborate to identify that problem instead of sort of pointing fingers at each other when problems like this arise. So if I was not partnered with the team that deployed that particular service account, I might see this message and think, oh, somebody's doing something wrong in my environment, when in fact, if I'm talking to my team members, then I know this is actually a condition that will occur if you choose to deploy service accounts with a particular security model. So I think one area that we haven't touched on yet, Sascha, that continues to sort of help teams collaborate is what we see here on the right. We have what SolarWinds is calling our environment for Active Directory. Can you walk us through a little bit? What is this resource telling us?
Well, we usually call this the mini stack because the large version is called the app stack. What we see is all the dependencies of whatever element we're looking at right now. So you see in the applications bar on top with the white background, that is the server, the application, sorry, we're looking at right now. And there's a couple of other applications which are related to this. And if we would go down, it's servers, which is the virtual servers in this example who runs Active Directory. We know that it is a virtual one because we see that a host is involved. Okay, we already know that this is a vCenter, sorry, and ESXi because somewhere down below is a vCenter. So anyway, what we see is the related elements across multiple layers in the IT stack, and it is showing us just what is important for us right now. So if we would troubleshoot Active Directory, again, this one looks quite healthy, so everything is fine. But if something would be red, we focus on what is important, and it would just exclude all those hundreds of others elements in IT which just don't matter in this situation.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think in terms of delivering that message that SolarWinds does more than just network monitoring, that's really made clear here in this resource. So we've talked about the fact that SolarWinds can use the server and application monitor product as part of the, whether you're dealing with the Orion platform with the perpetual licensing or whether you're dealing with the subscription-based licensing in the hybrid cloud observability tier of the SolarWinds solution. You've got that ability through the application monitoring module to go not only monitor Active Directory, but as we mentioned a moment ago, monitoring DNS. And so we see that get surfaced here in both our DNS monitoring and our Active Directory monitoring at the application tier. As Sascha said a moment ago, just narrowing down the world and connecting things together, but showing us a very focused view of it. So right below, we see our domain controllers, and it reflects very much what we see on the left side there with the domain controllers that are involved there. They're the same domain controllers that are affiliated with the environment here, as well as then, as Sascha said a moment ago, SolarWinds bringing additional information now about our virtualization tier. And so without going too far off track from our focus today around SAM and DNS, we can see that the virtual environment is also monitored by SolarWinds. So we know what's happening with vCenter, we know what's happening with the data stores for VMware, and we know how that translates into the volumes that are then used in these app servers and application environments. So that concept of SolarWinds doing more than just the network and bringing teams together, making it easy for them to collaborate, beginning with key network services such as DNS and Active Directory, I think has been pretty well demonstrated.
Thank you, gentlemen. I think that's wonderful. And I mean, I think what Sascha said is a single source of truth, isn't it? We talk about how, obviously we optimize each team, but they work together better, they collaborate better by using like this one single source of truth. It allows the channel community to jump between one area of the business to the next, but also if you're looking at senior IT C-level people, they want to have one report. They don't want to have several reports. So one report, one pane of glass, which can give them what's happening within their IT and see how they're working or how they're not working together within their teams, which I think, this is critical in the SolarWinds piece, where actually it's such a complementary piece from all the major tier ones, obviously being a vendor agnostic, but also because it covers every critical area of IT. And that means, we, even if it's slow, we can tell what's going wrong. If it's down, it's a big red tick and people complain. If it's slow, at least we know it's the yellow tick and we can get it sorted.
Yeah, it's really insightful what you just said a moment ago, James, about the change, the shift in dynamics that we're seeing in IT organizations today. And it's coming from that executive leadership, as you just mentioned. They're making big investments into teams and tools. And they're still frustrated because when problems occur, the teams are now taking their tools and looking at that data, and they're not always collaborating. Sometimes they're collaborating, and sometimes they're using those tools to defend themselves and point fingers back at each other. And so SolarWinds is really leading the way in bringing the tool to the forefront in a way that it's a collaborative tool where everybody's looking at the same information, even if they work on different teams. So the network team has all the data they need coming out of NPM. The applications and systems teams can get all the data they need coming from SAM and vMan and some of the other functionality within SolarWinds. And because they're doing it in one tool, we're now getting collaboration and we're getting outcomes as opposed to getting silos that are sort of pointing fingers at each other. So directors and executives, as we've been talking to them over the last couple of years, especially coming out of the pandemic, and we're getting more face-to-face time. We just did an event in London at Twickenham Stadium where we met with CIOs, and that message was very clear from them, is that they really expect more from their tools to help their teams collaborate going forward, as opposed to the struggle they've had with the tools that they owned in the past, where each tool was its own silo, and that contributed to poor communication. So SolarWinds is helping to break down those barriers, make it easier for teams to collaborate by bringing the data together in one interface, but still providing each team with the tool that they need to do their day-to-day job. I see you nodding your head, Sascha.
Yeah, I think the keyword here is consolidation. So we can probably replace, I don't know, 80-85% of all the tools out there. Not 100%, because there will always be tools which are so specialized for a particular job, they just have to be there, right? But in that case, we can just make them our friends. So we have an open API. We can talk to pretty much all solutions and bring data into our platform, or vice versa. Still one tool concept, right? So as for you guys, when you go out to customers, tool consolidation is a very hot topic because it will help saving companies money big time, and it's easy to understand.
Yeah, and you're right, Sascha. I had a CIO telling me at that Twickenham event, not only did they save money because they were buying fewer tools and they had a more cost benefit, they had a stronger cost benefit in their SolarWinds investment, but an unexpected benefit that they gained was they had fewer vendors. And so not only did they have fewer licensing costs with a more concentrated licensing investment in SolarWinds, but they didn't have to negotiate 5 different EULAs, 5 different end user license agreements, 5 different services agreements, 5 different training agreements. It was one vendor, a collection of capabilities inside that vendor's suite from SolarWinds, and then one partner like Loop1 to go train and implement and deploy. And so it not only simplified and enabled their teams to collaborate better, but it simplified the back office. The accounting team didn't have to send out 5 different payments to 5 different invoices. The legal team didn't have to review 5 different arrangements with 5 different vendors. And so it not only saved the IT team time and money, it saved the rest of the business time and money.
I think it's my all-time favorite, the story that IT stops using a tool, doesn't tell accounting, which means accounting renews. It's awesome if that's SolarWinds software, but hey, what can you do, right?
Right. We want to make sure when we decommission those tools that we let accounting know. All right. Well, so thanks, Sascha. James, I'll turn it over back to you.
No, thank you both. It's really insightful. I'm hoping that when we send this out to the channel, that they will see the value on this. I believe this is key, and tool proliferation, and it's costing customers thousands, tens of thousands of pounds, which SolarWinds can solve. So I appreciate you both time today, and I wish you all the best. If there is any interest or questions, then please contact your QBS reps, or contact me, James Robotham, at qbssoftware.com. Many thanks, and I'll speak to you soon.